much. I'm Glen Miller, as you heard. I think I'm the only person who provided a biography, which is why you heard rather a lot about me and not so much about my colleagues here. Excellent presentations. What a lot of detail. What a lot of projects you have on the go here. Jasmine asked me to talk about how your community might get involved with all of this work and, sort of beyond the formal process. So I'll do my best to cover this. Let's go to the next slide. All right, quick word about who's heard of the Canadian Urban Institute? Look at that, hands all over the place. That's great news. We've been around for 25 years and more. We were started by the former City of Toronto and the former Metro to do the kind of work we've been doing for 25 years, and we're still going. So like LAMP, we've got some sustaining qualities. So over to the next one, thank you. So what I'm going to try to do is cover 3 areas. As I said, Jasmine asked me to talk about how you might get involved. So I'm going to use some very different language to cover some of the same ground you heard. So what I'm going to try to do is make sense of all of the data that's been collected and sort of translate that into terms that you might be more familiar with. So I'm going to talk about the scope of the master plan, what kind of questions you might want to ask yourselves and the people that you meet with at these open houses, and say, who is South Etobicoke? What is your community? Who are you? How do you represent yourself in terms of the changing demographics today and tomorrow? And Jasmine also asked me to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is the aging of the population. Like a number of you in the audience, I have a vested interest in trying to sort out these issues, so I'll be spending a couple of minutes talking about that. So, what is the scope of the Transportation Master Plan? I think what we heard tonight from 3 different perspectives is there's a lot of projects on the way. It's kind of like being in a restaurant where they come and read you the menu, and you start to blur over because there's so many exciting specials, you don't know which one to choose. So how could you start to make sense of this? I think one of the things that you want to do is have a sense of what's been happening over the last 10 years. I mean, we've heard a couple of mentions of the closing of Mr. Christie's. Some 25 years ago, rather pleased to see on your slide the Waterfront West LRT from 1995, back in the last century. I actually worked on that when I was at Metro, which is when I got to know this part of the world in some detail. Very fine project that never went anywhere. But one of the other projects, one of the other things that's happened in the last 10 years is the emergence of Humber College. I mean, it's a little city all by itself. And it's great, it brings a lot of activity and a lot of economic spin-off to the region with all of the students coming here. And it's definitely having an impact on the area. So when you look at your area, Southern Etobicoke, look at things like Mr. Christie going and the impact of things like Humber College, because it's going to have quite an impact over the years to come. And ask about projects in the pipeline. That there's a part of the modeling that the city does is it has population forecasts which are done through a modeling exercise, but they add in and they take account of development projects that are being discussed that aren't the subject of formal applications yet. So I think it'd be good to get a sense of where the built environment is going to be 10 years from now. And I think this might be helpful, is what is the focus of the master plan? So think of it from your point of view. Think of it from the point of view as commuters. Think of it as the impact of this area being a place that people come through and travel through on their way from one place to another. And that's probably quite a big impact all by itself. And then helping improve the way you get around your neighborhood, which is really something that transportation planning I mean, some of my best friends are transportation planners, but it's probably true to say that the focus over, you know, for 60 years is how do you get people to work, right? And there hasn't been a lot of emphasis on how you get around your neighborhood. So I think one of the things you might want to think about is how do you approach that? And I think we heard some of that in some of the presentations today. So we want to get the right balance. So who is South Etobicoke? Who are you? Understand the impact of changing demographics. Some of understand the trends that have brought you to where you are today. Development takes place in waves. When the neighborhoods were first formed, a very different economic and demographic picture than you have today. As we talked about the loss of manufacturing in the area, are people going to be involved in more service work? If they're involved in more service work, does that mean they're going to be commuting out of the area, or are they going to be working in the area? I think these are good questions. If more people over a period of time are going to be office workers, they're not just moving downtown, but they're moving perhaps west to Etobicoke, to Mississauga. So I think that one of the things that will help you when you're sort of looking at all of these projects that are underway, some of which are more advanced than others, is things like Smart Track or Regional Express Rail, which take people from, say, Mimico to potentially Markham or potentially Mississauga. That can actually have quite an impact on your community if in 10, 15 years from now, more people living here are working in office jobs. And understanding the population today and tomorrow. I took a walk in the neighborhood before I got here a little early because I was a little concerned about the congestion on Lakeshore. So I had some time and I walked around and I found the Mattamy Homes project just down the road, about 10 minutes away. And so I inquired, and it's a semi-detached house, very nice. How much? How much do you think?
800,000.
1.6 million if you're quick, but the price is rising. So, I mean, clearly the economics of the socio-economic pattern of the area is going to change. And then some neighborhoods are going to be aging faster than the others. And so I'll go on to the next slide if I may. So why focus on aging? So this is, as I said, this is one of my big areas of interest. So you may have heard we have more seniors today than we have school-age children. And we're heading to the point where we have more seniors than people of working age. That has huge implications nationally and provincially. And by 2041, which in demographic terms is only around the corner, 25% of the population is going to be over the age of 65. But more importantly, the rate of increase in people over the age of 75, 85 is quite staggering. There's going to be 1.3 million people over the age of 85 in 25 years. So, as I said, in demographic terms, that's about 10 minutes. So why is aging an issue? So this picture here is, it could be a suburb anywhere in the region, maybe north of Etobicoke. Certainly southern Etobicoke has a very different pattern. Most of southern Etobicoke is in a grid pattern. It's easier to get around. But start to think about the mobility needs of an aging population. Will you still be driving? Does your neighborhood support active aging? What do we mean by active aging? Things that the ability to go places by foot or on a bicycle, or if you're really brave, on a rollerblade. So this picture actually depicts some of the car-dependent areas around the region, and the Ministry of Transportation has forecast that by 2036, which is just a very short time away, 75 people 75 and over who are currently in their 50s living in these areas, 42% of them won't have driving licenses. Do you know people living in places like this where you can't walk to the shops, you can't walk to anything? If you don't have a driving license, you're in bad shape. So one of the things that we have to do through planning and transportation planning is think about the needs of an aging population. Very quickly, last couple of slides. There we are. Lots of studies on this. You can't just say, oh, you can't drive anymore, too bad, take public transit. Well, it isn't really going to fix the solution for everybody, because as this study by Martin Turcotte, who's one of the top people at Statistics Canada, he writes some really good stuff on the propensity to take transit. And he's found that particularly men are very bad about making that transition from driving to take public transit. Anybody here remember the Pepsi generation? Yeah? I'm going to have to stop using, oh, thank you. I'm going to have to stop using this slide. It was one of my favorites. I took this in Don Mills about 10 years ago. I think he's probably still waiting for the bus. So, just go on to the next slide. Yeah. So this is from the Transportation Tomorrow study that is to transportation planners everywhere. It's meat and drink. If you can see, I don't have a little device, but the blue line represents car travel of people driving, and the red line indicates people who are passengers. And so what you're seeing there, and then the other important one is transit use. So people tend to take transit most when they're very young, going to school and things like that, and then it tails off. So what you're seeing in this sort of football shape picture is that as people age, so 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, the car use as a driver tends to go down, whereas their role as passengers goes up. So, so this is a very good reason for older people to be nice to their friends, because you need to be able to ask them to take you places if you can't walk there. So finally, one final slide. This is from a much longer presentation, but think about the reasons that you might want to be able to walk around your neighborhood, visit friends, maybe you're still working, how do you do your shopping? Very much one of the things that we found in our research at the Canadian Urban Institute, in a regenerating area, a big sign that the population is regenerating is if there's food stores. And there's lots of parts of Toronto where it's very difficult to find a food store. And you know, we refer to them as food deserts. And so that's one of the indicators. So these are all of the things, a little taste of some of the things you might want to think about when you're trying to make sense of all of these projects that have been discussed tonight. Think about the reasons that the projects are being planned. Are you talking about commuting needs? Are you talking about getting around your neighborhood? Or the other thing which you have to be concerned about is the amount of effort of taking people through the community. Thanks very much.